part 7 of my progress report so far on our haul out at Rudders Island in Langkawi. Rudders Island has a resort and a shipyard. You can see the shipyard in the top middle of the photograph. I own a 2013 38-foot Island Spirit catamaran. I recently had a birthday and I was treated to a lovely meal by my wife for lunch, and then after lunch I went to the pool, or I should say the whale pool. There I am in the bottom left hand corner, and I also treated myself to these lovely cinnamon rolls. They were 12 ringgit, rather large. And then for dinner I was treated to a lovely meal again by my wife. Also recently I injured my back and the pain was quite severe. I went to the chiropractor and got it fixed, and while we were out on the road we went and got some lovely mortadella cheese from the local cheese farm, and we had a lovely lunch, and my wife enjoyed the novelty things around the restaurant where we had our lunch at a great price. And because I injured my back, the boat work was a little bit idle for 2 weeks, and the local birds took up residence and built a nest, and each time I pulled the nest down they'd come back, and then after the third attempt they gave up. The moisture problems I was having in the last 6 videos, I've solved that by using the wet and dry vacuum to vacuum out the moisture through holes that I drilled in the hull, and you can see where I'm pointing to the join between the hull and the deck, and here's a diagram of the areas of moisture. If you pause it you can see, and the moisture meter I used was a digital display, which was extremely helpful in solving the areas that I needed to treat. And here I am using the moisture meter to check and find that that area was 0, 0, and some areas were 2 and 5, but below 10%, which was good. Then we started epoxying the holes and the damage to the keel and hull, and I used Cosan 90 part 1 and part 2, and did a lot of epoxy work, but some of it was in the middle of the day in the heat, and underneath on the vertical slope between the hull and the deck, I got bubbles in the mat, and I tried to get it out, but I ended up grinding them out and just laying epoxy rather than the mat. The transoms are still a problem, and there's still moisture in them, but I'm working on that. My main problem at the moment is I'm considering doing the whole beam of the stern of the boat, and I'm having trouble finding the sandwich core around Langkawi during this COVID-19 situation. This is a photograph of the sandwich core that somebody has suggested to me. In previous videos I showed I got 20 litres of water out of the port and starboard bow and stern, and here's an image of the water that was coming out at that time, and I used the wet and dry vacuum to get it out and then epoxy up the holes. And the bow problems, I filled in the foam and foam core in the bow, and I had to remove the water tanks to do that, of course, and then I used epoxy to cover the foam, and then I put the water tanks back into place. While I was doing it, I sanded down the flooring from both starboard and port and storage lockers, and I made a rookie problem by using the wrong converter in the epoxy primer, and it congealed, and here's a photograph of the congealed product. I only wasted 50 mil, but when I got it right, I sprayed on the epoxy primer. It's a grey. It turned out rather well, so I was happy. And then I used the all grip top coat and converter to spray a white product on the boards, and I was quite happy with the result. It's been 45 years since I did anything like this sort of work, so yes, I was happy. And here's a still photograph of the boards. You'll notice I had them too close together, and as I said, I installed both water tanks in the port and starboard storage lockers, and put the flooring back in place, and it turned out really nice. I cut them to fit better, so the fittings actually fit into the flooring. I finished epoxying both rudders and they're ready for painting. Just need to sand them off a little bit more, and you can see that they look rather neat and tidy, and I'm happy with the result. And up close you'll see that there's no more cracks, and the water actually runs off well. And here is the port rudder, which is the one that was bent and has been repaired. Because it's starting to rain more frequently, I decided to recycle the doors that we haven't been using that partition off the cabins. And you see in that photograph where they slide across. I cut the top off them using a borrowed circular saw. It was a Bosch. It's probably one of the best circular saws I've ever used. It did a really good job, and then I had to get the running rail off, and here are the doors and the top of the doors cut. I removed all the stainless steel and began cutting them to shape so that I could create a partition wall and side to stop the weather from getting into the cabin area, the galley area. It was extremely fiddly to get the angles and the cuts right, and it turned out rather well. I also had some stainless steel work done by LMS, or Langkawi Marine Services, and Matt and his helper came over to Rudders Island on 2 occasions to measure up and then do the work. Here's his Google Maps details if anybody wants to look. He also repaired the chunk that was broken off the propeller. He also created a nut for my 7-inch sanding disc, which I couldn't buy a spare one in the shops. He fabricated a flexible handheld sander that I gave him a design for to shape around the shape of the hull. And you'll see the young bloke doing a repair on the swim ladder. That used the stainless steel welder to fill in the pitting on the shaft. He reinforced the rudder brackets that I weren't happy with, made them stronger. Then they went about solving my anchor problems. What was happening was I'd winch up the anchor and it would hit the bow put and cause a little bit of damage, and over time we didn't want that. So the U-shaped bracket that you see in the middle of the picture was cut off with the grinder like that, and placed on the ground and bent back 30 degrees so that the anchor itself would not go up as far as it normally did. Then he welded it back into place. Matt created a 45-degree shaped aluminium plate which fits up into the bow put between the 2 trampolines to stop the anchor from beating up against the bow put. And I had to bend it slightly to get it to the right angle to fit. My measurements were wrong, so they had to take it away and cut 3 centimetres off so that it fit on the curve of the angular bow put. As you can see, it looks great and will stop the anchor from banging up and causing damage. The video was produced by myself, and that's the end of another exciting video of the part 7 of my haul out and the work in progress at Rudders Island, Langkawi in March 2021.